for my wife for taking those children away from me, get me into more trouble than I could handle. So once again I set off. I left my hatred. I set off. I left with my hatred, resentment, and the clothes on my back, this time for good. The largest city close by I could found, dead broke, drinking myself into oblivion on Skid Row. At first, a day labor job provided for rent and food, but before long, all the money had to go for booze. I found a mission where someone in need could sleep and eat free. But the bugs were so bad, the food so terrible, and the people were such thieves. I decided that it was easier to just sleep outside, and that I really didn't need to eat so often. So I found that hobo jungles. Parked cars and abandoned houses made nice places for my bottle, my resentments, and me. No one dared to bother me. I was utterly bewildered at where life had taken me. Other hobos I met taught me the safest way to hop on a moving freight train and how to protect myself. They told me who were the easiest people to get a handout from and how to scam them. My biggest problem at the time was to find a way to get enough to drink to keep the reality of my life at bay. I was consumed by hate. For the next 6 years, I went from Skid Row to Skid Row. One boxcar headed in any direction was good as another. I had no place to go. One thing about it, I never got lost because I never cared where I was. I crossed the United States 3 times with no plan, no reason, not eating half the time. I hung out with the other misfits like myself. Someone would say they were hiring in Florida or New York or Wyoming and would set up and off we'd go. But by the time we would finally get there, they would say they were not hiring anymore. That was all right because we didn't want to work anyway. One scorching day, I was in a desert town drinking. Something unusual happened. I felt as though I had reached a point where I couldn't go on. To get away from everyone, I managed to find some booze and started walking out into the desert, thinking, I'll just go until I die. Soon, so drunk I couldn't walk another step. I fell to the ground and moaned, "Oh God, please help me." I must have passed out because hours later I came to and found my way back to town. At the time I had no idea what made me change my mind about death. Today I know it was my higher power took over my life. By this time I was so wild-eyed and filthy, people would shy away from me. I hated the look of fear on their faces when they saw me. They looked at me as if I were not human, and maybe I wasn't. In one large city, I took to sleeping on the grates with a piece of plastic over me so I wouldn't freeze. One night, I found a clothing drop box I could get into. It made a nice warm place to sleep, and I could get new clothes in the morning. In the middle of the night, someone threw in more clothes. I opened the top and looked out and shouted, "Thanks."
Thanks.
That woman threw up her hands and ran away screaming, "Lordy, Lordy!" She jumped into her car and screeched off. I was just about as sad a figure of a man as is possible when I jumped off that freight. I found an empty refrigerator car sitting on the siding and took up residence in it. Here you get welfare work very easily, so I went off to apply. Now I could eat. It was my 3rd time in this town, so I headed straight for my favorite bar. Here, I met a barmaid who drank like a fish and was mean a woman as I had ever seen. But she had a place to live, so I moved in, and thus began the romance of a lifetime. I finally had a roof over my head, sheets, and food. All we did was drink and fight, but she worked at the bar, so it kept us going. With just enough cash for booze, we drank continuously for several months. Then on my way to find a drink, I ran into one of my old hobo buddies, an older man. I remember him as an excessive drinker, an alcoholic. And here he was walking toward me down the street in a white shirt, tie, and suit, looking marvelous, with a big smile on his face. He told me he'd quit drinking, and how he'd managed to do it, and how much better he felt. My first thought was, if he can do that, I can do that. And much better, because I'm only 33. He took me down into his club where there were some other recovered alcoholics. I drank coffee while they all told me how they had changed. It looked like they might have something here. If they could do this, maybe, just maybe, I could too. Their enthusiasm was catching. I began to feel excitement inside, but had no idea why. I rushed off to tell my new girlfriend about about what had happened, and how great it would be if we quit drinking. "You're nuts," she yelled at me. "You can just drag your rear back to your refrigerator car. I've got parties to go to." Although I seemed unable to transmit my excitement, I told her once more. The next day we both quit drinking. There are no words to explain why it happened or how it happened. It just did. It was a miracle. Every day we were able to stay sober was another gift from a higher power I had given up on many long years before. The next year we took a job managing a camp outside of town where drunks were sent to get dried out and sobered up. It was our responsibility to see that they had food and stayed out of trouble. Both tasks were almost impossible at times, but we kept trying. With some support from old-timers in AA, we lasted a year. This was a volunteer job, and we had little money for ourselves. When the year was up, I went over to the list of drunks who had been through the place, 178 in all. I exclaimed to my partner, "Not a single one of them is sober today." "Yeah," she replied, "but you are, and I are."